Hi everyone, and welcome to your introductory lecture on what it means to be human and move through space in our bodies. This particular lecture is called Understanding the Complexities of Living Identity in Daily Life, the Intersection of Being Human with Others, an overview. And this is a very complex concept I'm speaking to you about, but it's also one that's very accessible, that you'll understand as soon as we begin to speak about it. So I'm excited for you to ask any questions that you have and to keep talking about this all semester long. So the central concept we have here is we do not live one part of ourselves at a time. And of course, we've been talking about this since the beginning of time in so many different ways. When we talk about the exploration of what it means to be human, we've always been aware that we aren't just one thing. We aren't just our biological sex. We are not just our gender identity, not just our race, not just our ability, not just our age. We are all of these things at once. And we have been critiquing the complexity of how these different identities interact in lots of different ways. It has been through political activists. It has been through artists and writers. One of the pieces that comes to my mind was written by Sojourner Truth in Ain't I a Woman, where she talked about what does it mean to be Black and a woman and how that intersected in her life throughout time. So we're going to start this conversation with Kimberly Crenshaw, who coined the term in 1989, intersectionality, to talk about how our bodies are simultaneously so many different identities that cannot be pieced out and dealt with one at a time. We are always all of our identities, even if one is more at the forefront than another. And she often explains this by a court case that needed a term to understand the experience of the plaintiff. And the plaintiff was a Black woman who had not been hired at a company. And she initially lost her case. And she lost the case because the judge said, well, this company clearly hires Black people, and they clearly hire women. So I don't know what you have for evidence that you are experiencing either racism or sexism. But there was a catch. And Kimberly Crenshaw explains that the company hired Black men to do manual labor in the warehouse. They hired white women to be receptionists. They did not want the Black woman in the warehouse because they wanted men doing those manual jobs. They did not want her as a receptionist because they wanted white women, not Black women, to be the first people that clients saw as they came in the company. So, as a Black woman, she had this intersection of marginalization that she was not hired for either position. And Kimberly Crenshaw said, we have legislation that protects us against sexism. We have legislation that protects us against racism. But we have to watch how these intersect and see the overlapping marginalization challenges, and at times also privileges that cause our lived experience to be what it is. So, the network of culture we travel. We are all trying to get through the traffic of culture. The reason why Kimberly Crenshaw used the term intersectionality is because she wanted us to see it as though we were in an intersection. And it's important to see this as an intersection because our highway system, our traffic, is not naturally occurring. We build the traffic circles, we build the intersections, we build the roads, we build the vehicles that are on them, and then move through this traffic. And we have all of these roads that are created. And she said, if you could see this idea of you're at an intersection and there's a road for race, there is a road for ability. There's a road for age, a road for sex, a road for class, a road for gender identity and sexual orientations, roads for fat stigma, roads for nationalism. And we're on this road, and how we experience this highway, how we experience all of these different ways the traffic is moving, depends on simultaneously the different identities we're navigating on a day-to-day basis. And if we see this as trying to get from one side of that intersection to the other on foot, we can see how that would be easier for some people to do than others. So let's go more. Now, we have this idea of this road with traffic lights, with all these signs to help manage traffic, as well as laws that can be enforced. And Kimberly Crenshaw helps us understand that. The roads are the structural intersectionality, how we have built a culture that privileges some bodies over others. We have lots of research that shows that if you are in a white body, you are much more likely to be taken seriously for employment, be taken seriously with health concerns, to be taken seriously when you say you are innocent in a court of law. We know all these things exist. Same things exist with the idea of sexual orientation and gender identity. Those bodies that are seen as not heteronormative receive less opportunities and less privileges, often are dealing with discrimination. Same thing happens when a body is read as too old, or if a body is read as disabled. That means we're going to have different circumstances, from how someone interacts with us when they see us on the street in a coffee shop, to how doctors and employers and judges all will understand us. Now, there is the political intersectionality. All of these roads are built, there's cars coming at us, but there are protections, the laws that are there to manage. So if we think of this idea that there is people set up to protect us on the streets, right? We have law enforcement and traffic and people there to guide traffic to make sure we stay safe. We can think of those as the laws that are there to protect us from discrimination. We have the Civil Rights Act. We have the Americans with Disability Act. We had women's suffrage. We have anti-sex discrimination acts, right? This idea of ways to protect us, right, from these different things. But then there's also that representational intersectionality, how pop culture depicts us as people. And we consider that as how people are going to interpret who you are when you're in the road, how the people driving that car have learned to understand people like you in the road. Are you someone who is cautious that should be taken care of? Or are you someone who is clearly acting in a way that you are dangerous, right? We can kind of see this, like, do they see you in a crosswalk or do they not, right? Okay, so now we know this system exists. How does this system function through different lives? And I use my own experience to articulate this particular understanding of the intersections, because as I've interviewed people, I'm a narrative researcher, I'm an ethnographer, which means I study cultures, I study how people understand who they are and what it means to live in their bodies. And over time, I've understood that I have a different experience moving through culture than other people do. Now, I'm very interested in embodied stigma. I'm especially interested in physical disability because I am physically disabled. I have cerebral palsy. I have a very noticeable limp. And throughout my life, I've had people make assumptions on my intellectual ability, on the fact that I limp. I've had people make assumptions on my endurance, based on it, on whether or not I am going to be jarring in a particular space because of how my body moves, and therefore I should not be allowed to have that sort of job because it's forward-facing and my limp might be off-putting to potential buyers of products. These are different experiences I've had. that is sometimes compounded by the fact that I am a woman, and there's some jobs, there's some experiences that people would say that would better be suited towards men, because sexism says that men should have more powerful positions, men should have more authority, men can do more physical things than women. So that's coming at me. So I am a woman who is also physically disabled. So I understand I have traffic coming at me at these different intersections. However, I have some stoplights. Those stoplights include white privilege, in that systems are set up the default, assuming a person is white. I'm not going to experience racism when I'm interviewing for a job. The odds of a doctor that I'm needing to see looking at my body and saying, I don't really want to treat this person because I know people from this race aren't going to take me seriously. They're not going to follow my rules. There's not an assumption I don't have insurance. Those kinds of things help me because I am white. In addition to being white, I also have a PhD. I'm very well educated, which means I'm also middle class. And so there's the idea that I have a secure job, that I'm going to be able to pay for things. It's that idea of I'm intellectually disabled. I can easily combat with other people in ways that other people who are also physically disabled may not be able to, because we do see these degrees, this education, this steady employment to show intelligence and ability in someone who should be valued and taken seriously in our capitalist economy, right? So at this point, I have traffic lights. I have yield signs that are slowing down traffic for me, allowing me to really focus on getting through disability stigma or getting through gender discrimination, because I'm not having to focus on these other elements. I'm also a straight married mother, which are all different aspects of my identity that people see as valuable, that see as someone who is having a normative middle-aged experience through the world, and that way it makes me more valuable to other people. Oh, she's a mother, she takes care of other people, she isn't just a disabled person that someone else needs to care for. That gives me more authority. It gives me more credibility. That there is another stop sign. It is another yield sign. It's another traffic light slowing things down, helping me cross the road. I also don't deal with fat stigma as an average-sized person. And because of that, I can move through, and I can be able to have doctors take me seriously as someone who is taking care of themselves. We know that doctors often don't treat people who are overweight. Studies show that a person who's overweight is just told to lose weight, when sometimes that's actually not the problem, and they're more likely to die of different disabilities, of different health conditions, because the doctors are so focused on their weight. I'm also middle-aged. I haven't gotten to that point where I am an elder yet. People see me as still mid-career, which means I am not assuming that I no longer am relevant. I'm also not having to deal with the ageism of society like I will in years to come. And I say that in years to come because it's important to realize that just because at this moment there's a stoplight, just because at this moment there's a yield sign, just because at this moment we have a crosswalk that is helping us navigate the different traffics of the world that we need to, it doesn't mean we'll always have that. Our socioeconomic status can change. Our age will change. Our ability, if we keep living, will also change. So there is this idea, while some things are stagnant, like like how we read our race is read, that ordinarily is not going to change. There's also that idea of, well, yes, our biological sex, we often will think of as stagnant, but we know now that it's not, right? I personally am cisgender, but people who are not cisgender, people who are transgender, people who are gender non-conforming, can go from having people read them in one way and giving them those privileges, giving them those yield signs, giving them those traffic lights, those crosswalks to get through, and suddenly those are taken away. Those are taken away as a body transitions, as a person is true to their gender identity, as someone comes out to say who they are when they can't be read. by the general population of a particular identity group. Same thing, you might have nationalism in one place where you are considered a citizen of that country that has a right to be there. You migrate and you no longer have that anymore. So this idea too that while some of these identities might feel more stagnant, our bodies are moving through, and how the traffic understands our bodies and interprets them as we're moving through, how vulnerable we are, how dangerous it is, changes at different times. It's always fluid. And sometimes it's easier to get from one side of the road to the other, to get to that space of success at one moment than it will be in another. We have to understand that the intersection, we can't isolate one point. We are always looking and moving through at different times. And we are going to spend the semester exploring what it means for different bodies to be in these intersections and what their lived experiences are. I can't wait to talk with you more about it. Send me any questions you have, and there's a quiz just to see if you're understanding the basic concepts. Thanks so much. I'll talk with you soon.